Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, and I'm out on another walk. This time, I'm just north of Shrewsbury, by the Battlefield Church. And the reason I'm here is because I want to explore the battlefield, the site of the Great Battle of 1403. This is the Battlefield Church. I think it's called Mary Magdalene or Saint Mary Magdalene. And it's here apparently on the site of a mass grave that took place after the Battle of Shrewsbury. And it's quite an impressive church now, but this isn't the original church. In fact, there was a chapel first and then later a church, and then later this rather grand edifice from the 18th century. But the battle took place in 1403, and you can walk around the battlefield now, as I'm intending to do. And as I do that, I thought it would be quite relevant that I give you some details about this rather important and gruesome battle. And one of the interesting things about the Battle of Shrewsbury is really and truly it was the first time that the English archers fired against each other, and it proved the deadliness of the longbow. So I'm going to leave the church and go through this designated walk that has been set up with relevant boards, interpretation boards. Let's head down this way through the forested area. At the time of the battlefield, this was a huge field of peas, which would have made it very tricky for fighting, I can imagine. But before we get there, let's go back to why the battle happened. On the throne in 1403 was Henry IV. He was a king in troubled times, and in those times he had problems with the Scots, problems with the Welsh. And so he enlisted his many lords to help him with these problems, and one of the lords were the Northumberland Lancastrian family, the Percys, and one of the notorious of them was Henry Hotspur Percy. And in exchange for helping the king quell the Welsh and negotiate with the Scots, he offered land and money. And so the Percys got involved. They gathered their armies, they went out and helped the king, they did their dutiful duty. But in the event, after sorting out these problems, the king, Henry IV, he didn't give them the land that they wanted, and the money was not forthcoming. In fact, the land went to a rival. Just peeking over the area of the battle now, and you can see that it is a pretty flat, straight field. And what's interesting as you walk around the area is that it hasn't been built on in 800 years, and I think that's pretty fantastic. But we haven't got yet to the reasons of the battle. So the king had promised land and hadn't delivered. Percy was angry. He was annoyed. The king had betrayed him. And so he gathered his forces. He gathered his men. And these were trained men. Remember, back then, men were required as part of their duty to their lords to practice archery. They had to be available at any time to be called up and go to battle. They had no choice. And later on, as you will know in history, Henry V took such men, such trained archers, to Agincourt and others. But back in 1403, Percy gathered his troops and started to march south to deal with the king. As it happened, the king was marching north, and ironically, he was marching north to actually help the Percys with the Scots, because he was unaware really of these grievances that they had got to such an extent. Here behind me, more of the field where this huge battle took place. In fact, if I come round here, you'll see here is the other field. No battles going on now, only with weeds. So these two armies were marching towards each other, and as the king, sorry, I've got to negotiate, how do we get through here? Not that way. Oh, this way. As the king reached Burton-on-Trent, it was only then that he learnt of Percy's grievances and that there was an army coming to meet him. So he changed his plans and he marched towards Shrewsbury. As he came towards Shrewsbury, he arrived before the Percys could take the town. And the Percys arrived, the rebels, Percy Hotspur, and the king camped one side of the river and around the town, and the Percys camped the other side around the town. And this was on the 20th of July, 1403. Well, the following morning, the two sides parleyed, as they say in the trade. They negotiated terms. The king, not, I suppose, wanting to get into a battle, offered various things to try and quell the situation, but the Percys were too annoyed. They wanted more. I suppose their reputation had been tarnished and they were not happy. And so in the end, nothing could be done to prevent a battle. They finished talking about noon. I'm not quite sure what happened after then. Oh, where are we going now? There's another way that way. Well, there's a way this way. Let's go this way through yet another gate. I've got to work out how you do that with one hand. Go forward. Okay. So the two sides had given up with negotiations, and by the early evening it was inevitable there was going to be a battle. So the king raised his sword at dusk on the 21st of July 1403, and the battle commenced. It was a bloody and horrible battle. Amongst the melee was the prince Henry, the future king Henry V. Of course, he was only a prince then, and during that battle he sustained a terrible wound. An arrow hit him in the face, and it was only the quick-wittedness and skill of the surgeon, the royal surgeon, who managed to save his life. And throughout the rest of his life he had this dreadful scar on his face. Well, during the battle, many of the archers were showing off their skill, and the king's men suffered pretty horrifically right from the start, from the Percys' side, with the arrows hitting them and taking them down like flies. And then there was a charge. The Percys' side, the rebels, they charged for the king. And in the charge, Percy Hotspur lifted up his visor on his armour, his suit of armour, and some plucky, lucky archer managed to get an arrow in the little slit. And then it was all over for Percy. The arrow killed him and he fell to the ground. But there was confusion because the rebels thought that the king had been killed, and they shouted out, "King Henry is dead." But the king wasn't dead, and he was able to reply, "Henry Percy is dead." And when Henry Percy was unable to reply, and it confirmed that he was in fact dead, the battle came to a halt. There were terrible casualties. I mean, you talk of a battle. There were thousands of men. I mean, it's the different reports say that the Percys had, or the king had, from 14,000 to 60,000 men. The Percys had smaller amounts of men. They hadn't managed to get as many men en route as they came south as they had hoped. But even so, this whole area, you can imagine, littered with bodies and terrible things. Well, when the battle had finished, Percy was taken away and buried, but the king wasn't having any of that. So the body was disinterred. Henry Hotspur was disinterred and taken to Shrewsbury, where he was set up between two millstones and impaled on a spear. It's coming up to another of these confusing gates. There is instructions, so I ought to be able to read and follow them. And so there we are. The battle had ended. The king had managed to survive. He had nearly, however, lost his life, lost his son's life, and lost his throne. But fortunately he hadn't, and 800 years later we can come back and we can commemorate the battle. We can visit the church. That originally there was a chapel built on the site of the mass grave, and then, as I say, there was a second church around 1460, and then finally there was the 19th century church that you can visit today. Anyway, so I hope you've enjoyed my short little walk around the battle site at the Battle of Shrewsbury, and that you will come and visit and think about it. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't, press the bell notification so you're notified every time I upload a video, and leave a comment and tell me what you think. And check out the Patreon page and help and support this channel so I can bring you more exciting walks. Until the next time, goodbye.